Mark Gibson's Human Rights Channel. Accountant with designations CPA, MBA, CMA, ACPA, ASA, Australia. Enjoy learning!
We'll discuss about linear programming. Like I said, this will be the most challenging quantitative method, pero papadaliin natin by illustrating it via different discussion problems. Also, we'll give you an assignment to practice it, no? Kasi linear programming really is mathematical method, no? Rather than accounting, kasi accounting is more an analysis, you know. So linear programming is algebra. So if you did well on your algebra, actually you only need a basic knowledge on algebra to make sure that you'll be able to follow linear programming, you know. So okay. So linear programming is a technique used to optimize an objective function. So when we say objective function, ano lang ba yun? So either we maximize revenue, maximize profit, or minimize cost. So yun yung when we say objective functions, no? So what's our objective? Usually increase our revenue, or in this case maximize it, maximize the profit, or minimize the cost, no? Subject to constraints, no? Constraints in this case would be scarce resources, minimum or maximum level of production or performance, no? Paano yun? uh, I'm sure in your management accounting, or you're in second year, no? So it will be on your fourth year pa. So in management accounting, there's a concept na called differential costing. So in differential costing, you're given let's say different scenario where you have to calculate for your revenue or your costs depending on the constraint, no? So meaning uh, let's give an example. Sabihin natin na there's just a maximum capacity, say this machine, no? So yung machine natin can only do 10,000 units, and that's the maximum level, no? So meaning uh, we need to maximize our revenue, thinking that our machine can only produce 10,000 units. So in linear programming, aside from uh, having the objective function, we also need to um, list down all the constraints, no? So later on we'll discuss that, no, na how to go about these constraints, no? Okay? So in business, linear programming is used for planning resource allocations to make optimum use of limited resources. So conditions calling for the use of linear programming include specification of a cost or revenue objective formula. The limited resources must be subject to alternative uses. The alternative uses of the limited resources must be specified. So while this is purely a mathematical method, linear programming can also be used in business. In fact, quantitative methods in general, these are methodologies that we use in business, no? In this case, linear programming is mostly in business operations, no? So, pansinin niyo, class, this is used in planning resource allocation to maximize limited resources. So there's really a constraint, no? Meaning hindi unlimited yung resources natin. Could be materials that can be um, limited up to certain level lang, no? So, okay. So probably let's apply it to a problem so that we can uh, better appreciate pa no yung discussion natin on linear programming. So, uh, I'm sure not this stage you're already aware of my approach, no? So, the module or the discussion as part of the module for linear programming is already posted in Canvas. So what I do during our session or during our synchronous activities to present you another example. In fact, class, those the problems that I use during my discussions are um, previous CPA board exams questions, no? So, well, at least, well, that's my target naman eh. Well, that's our target, ano? So, not just for you to pass the course, but at least to prepare you for the CPA board. Ganun dapat mag-isip ang mga accounting students, no? While it's true that it's challenging at least to pass the subject, ang talagang iniisip mo talaga palagi is uh, to prepare yourself for the board exam. No? Ganun palagi. Kasi graduating or passing the course is just one. No? But really, the ultimate test is for you to pass the board. No? Anyway, dami kong sinasabi. So let's go to discussion problem 1. So in this discussion problem 1, the requirements are number 1, formulate the objective function and all of the constraints in order to maximize contribution margin. O, so yun ha. Um, so later, we'll formulate the objective function tapos iisa-isahin natin lahat ng constraints in order to maximize contribution margin. So yun ang talaga natin ha. Yun yung pinaka-objective natin to maximize contribution margin. Kasi remember, objective functions can be what? Maximize revenue, maximize profit, or minimize cost. Siyempre, it goes without saying that when we talk about contribution margin, it's actually to maximize it. Na? And then second requirement is how many units of product X and product Y should be produced to maximize the total contribution margin. Kung this is second year, no? Anyway, sige. So we'll also discuss that. And then number 3, calculate the contribution margin at the optimal solution. Sige. Let me read the problem. Spiky Company manufactures 2 products, X and Y. Each product must be processed in each of the 3 departments. Actually, only 2 departments, no? Machining and finishing. The hours needed to produce 1 unit of product per department and the maximum hours per department as well as the contribution margin per unit of product are given below. So yan na, pag-usapan natin muna to. Product natin is X and Y. And then also given here are the maximum capacity. So ibig sabihin hindi pala tayo unlimited. So may constraints. So ibig sabihin within machining, ang production hours lang natin is 420. Siguro dahil limited lang din dahil these are machines, no? Syempre pag na-overwork yung machine, there's a tendency to break down. So and that's why, no? And finishing naman, finishing department, the production hours is only 600 hours, no? So that's the constraints. Okay? And then of course, provided are the contribution margin per unit for product X and product Y. So 4 and 5. Okay? So, let me open na ba? Okay, sige. Let's do discussion problem 1. Sige. Kita ng screen ko, Mark? Excel tong naka-project na yan.
Yes po, sir.
Sige, thank you. Sige, isa-isayin natin. Una kasi, ang unang requirement is formulate the objective function. Yun lang muna ha. So, objective function natin is to maximize contribution margin. So, in this case, gamitin lang natin si x and y as our variable. No? So, product x, so that would be 4x. Kasi remember class, ang objective natin is to maximize contribution margin. So, to express that, so 4x, so ibig sabihin 4, kasi 'di ba yung 4 is contribution margin per unit of x, 'di ba? So 4x plus 5y. So that's our objective. Objective function, which is to maximize contribution margin. Okay? So what are the constraints naman? Una, sa machining. Sa machining, we only have 420 hours and that's the maximum capacity. Eh ilan daw bang oras ang kailangan ni X at ni Y doon sa machining department? Si X requires 2 hours per unit. So we'll express that as 2x. And then si Y requires 1 hour in the machining department. So that's 1y. So we'll express that as, nandito na ang class 2x. So that's 2 hours per unit of x plus 1y. Actually, di ba wala namang 1y. Pero for the sake of discussion, nilagay ko lang siya as 1y. Pero in reality, it should be y. Tama ba yun? Mas kabisado niyan sa algebra, di ba? So, like I said, for the sake of our discussion, let me put 1y. No? So, but that signifies 1 hour per unit of y is less than or equal to 420. Okay? Sige, so dapat sana nakakasunod pa ha? Pag-usapan natin si finishing. Sa finishing department, we have a maximum capacity of 600 hours. Also, in finishing department, X requires 2 hours and Y requires 3 hours. So let's express that again in algebraic equation. So that's 2x. So 2 hours per unit of x plus 3y. 3 hours per unit of y is less than or equal to 600. So kung napansin nyo class, wala pa tayong naba-violate, no? Ginagawa pa lang natin, sinusulat pa lang natin isa-isa yung constraints, no? In algebraic equation or in algebraic form, no? So, ulitin natin ha, para at least medyo ito lang muna kayo tumingin ha. Ito lang muna tayo sa mga naka-yellow na cells. In linear programming, the first steps to do is to formulate objective function. No? So that's the initial step. No? Initial step is formulate objective function. Kanina, sinabi ko na objective function could be to maximize your revenue, maximize your profit, of course, minimize your cost. No? Yun lang naman palagi ang pinag-uusapan natin. So remember in our cost volume profit analysis, no? So there are factors contributing to the increase or decrease of your revenue and costs, no? So that's also the same principle here in linear programming. Though in linear programming, we're expressing it in algebraic equation. No? So again, uh, our formula to maximize, kaya F max, no? Formula to maximize contribution margin is 4x plus 5y. So ulitin ko, saan galing tong 4x plus 5y? We have two products. Also, we discussed in your CVP analysis that whenever we have two products, kailangan pinagko-combine natin yan, di ba? To calculate your total contribution margin or even in your uh, variable costing, di ba? Pinagko-combine natin yan and even in your traditional costing, we're combining two products to get your total. So that's also the same principle in linear programming. So here, mas madali nga eh, kasi binigay na sa atin agad yung contribution margin per unit. And also, requirement A leads us to do an objective function to maximize contribution margin. So in that case, 4 units of X plus 5 units of Y, that's our objective function. So to maximize contribution margin, syempre yung unknown dyan is yung X, no? And yung Y. Again, we use X and Y just to denote the unknown, no? But also to denote products X and Y. So, kaya mas dinalian na lang natin, no? So instead of using another variable here, we just use X and Y also to denote those two products, no, in the problem. Okay? So the next step in linear programming is to list down all the constraints. No? Kasi nga we're working on scarce resource. So in this case, we only have maximum capacity in the production departments. No? So in machining, we have only 420. And finishing, we have 600 hours. So para bang sinasabi natin dito, si X requires 2 hours, si Y requires 1 hour. But in total, it can only be equal or less than 420 hours. Yung combined hours nila should only be equal to or less than 420 hours. So that's our constraint, no? Constraints number 1. Another constraint is on the finishing department. Kasi in finishing department, we can only use 600 hours. So, combined X and Y, si X requires 2 hours. And then si Y requires 3 hours. So, in total, they can only use 600 hours in finishing department. So, that's objective function number 2. Now, also in linear programming, we have non-negativity constraints. So meaning, yung units natin can never be less than 0. Kasi nga naman in real life, Pag halimbawa tinanong ka ba ng production supervisor mo, so Mark, ilang units ang na-produce natin? Sir, -500. So parang may mali, 'di ba? So kaya we'll also express that to say X is greater than or equal to 0. And Y is greater than or equal to 0. Actually, we just place it here to denote that units can never be negative, no? It can be 0, syempre, kung wala ka talaga na-produce, but can never be negative, no? So yun lang naman yung sinasabi natin dito sa last two equations natin. Okay? So the answer to requirement A is this. Now imagine, no, in CPA board exam. Actually, after this is the straight problem, no? So there's another one for your assignment, but the rest of the discussion problems would be the approach on how CPA board examination questions were formulated, no? So of course, it's multiple choice. So para ang ginagawa naman sa CPA board is i-provide to as part of the choices, no? Tapos yung isa diyan imamali. Tapos yun yung possible na answer, no? Anyway, we'll go to that. So siguro ang kailangan ko lang dito i-point out is kailangan marunong kang mag-create ng simple algebraic equation. At kung napapansin mo, simple lang naman talaga siya dahil nilatag lang natin yung constraints, no? Kasi objective function natin is given eh. Provided yung contribution margin natin. Nagkataon lang na X and Y dahil X and Y yung products natin. So what if ibang products naman? In fact, meron tayo ditong isang example. Ito, assignment natin, no? Ang product natin is Eclipse and Nova. So therefore, in your objective function, ang i-expect ko is N. Ano nga isa? Eclipse. So E and N, no? So para lang mas mabilis tayo, ganun lang gawin natin, no? So kung ano yung product name, yun yung gamitin natin as variable, no? In formulating algebraic equation. Ito, wag ka rin papalito. Kasi I'm sure meron ka na rin palatandaan para i-express yung less than tsaka greater than. In my case kasi, ang pinaka-hint ko dyan is kung saan nakaturo yung, kung saan nakabuka. Anyway, dalawa lang naman yan. So, I think mabilis lang naman matandaan kung greater than or less than. Yun nga lang sa akin nga, kung saan nakabuka, yung pinaka-ganun. No? Anyway, so I'm sure na intindihan nyo na yan. Okay, so let's go to requirement number 2. How many units of each product X and Y should be produced to maximize the total contribution margin? O, sige, pag-usapan natin yung requirement number 2. Sige. So, in this case, ang ginawa ko is, naglagay muna ako ng table using our objective function. So, di ba, 4x, that's 4 contribution margin per unit of X, plus 5y, 5 contribution margin per unit of Y. Siyempre, ang result ng dalawa is your total contribution margin. And again, ang pinag-uusapan natin dito is yung maximum total contribution margin. So, isa-isahin muna natin. Una, i-test muna natin tong equation number 1. Equation number 1 natin is 2x plus 1y. But instead, gawin ko na lang equal, no? Kaysa yung may less than pa, no? So, equal 420. If x is 0, kasi class, di ba, in algebra, kailangan natin ma-identify. Kung meron dalawang unknown, kailangan na muna natin ma-identify yung isa in order for us to solve for the other variable, no? So in this case, if x is 0, so 0 daw si x, meron na tayong way to calculate our y. Tama ba yan? Tama. Diba? So if x is 0, so 2 times 0 is 0 plus 1y, so therefore y is equals to 420. Nakasunod ba? Kasi kung, di ba, 2, sabi ang x daw is 0, if x is 0. So 2 times 0 is 0 plus 1, y. So therefore, y is equals to 420. Okay? I-test ngayon natin yung second equation natin. Second equation is 2x plus 3y is equals to 600. Again, if x is 0, dito na tayo ha. If x is 0, so that's 2 times 0 is 0 plus 3y. So kung meron kang 3y dito, to get the y, i-transpose mo yung 3. So that's 600 divided by 3. Kaya nakuha natin yung 200. So y is equivalent to 200. Now class, tapos na tayo dun sa isang function natin, no? Yung isang objective natin. Ngayon, ano yung kailangan natin gamitin? Is it 420 or 200? Class, ang palagi natin gagamitin is yung lower value. So in this case, meron lang tayong dalawang products. So dun tayo sa lower value, which is 200. In any cases where there are 3 or 2 or more products, dun tayo sa lowest value. So in this case, ang gagamitin natin is yung 200. So that's, di ba sabi natin, x is 0 and then 200 units of y. So 5 times 200, so that's 1,000 pesos. So total contribution margin natin is 1,000. So that's function number 1. Okay? O class, nakakasunod pa ba? O puntahan natin yung next function natin. If y naman is 0. So kung kung nakikita nyo, procedural yung ginagawa natin class ha. Hindi tayo tumatalon ng iba't iba. So step by step tayo. So next function natin is 2x plus 3y is less than or equal to 600. So let's express that as mali to. Dapat to 600. Hindi. Ito pala yung second function natin. Sige. Dito naman tayo sa una. Yung gamitin muna natin yung unang equation. 2x plus 1y is equals to 420. Ngayon, if y is 0 naman. Ha? So ito tayo ha. If y is 0, so meron tayong 2x plus 0. Again, to get the x, 420 divided by 2. So that's 210. Okay? Punta naman natin yung second equation. That's 2x plus 3y is equals to 600. So dito na tayo ha. Again, if y is 0, so that's 2x plus 0. So therefore, 600 divided by 2. So x is equals to 300. Again, ngayon nakuha na natin yung value ng x. Kunin natin yung value, yung lower value, which is 210 versus 300. Doon tayo sa mas mababa, which is 210. Okay? So, 210 times 4, that's 840. Eh, syempre, 0 naman tayo dito eh, no? So, total is 840. So, 4 times 210, that's 840. So, okay na rin tayo dito. Finally, the next step is to combine the two equations. Pero paano ba natin gagawin yun, no? So, meron tayong dalawang equation. Yun pa rin naman, yung constraints. Let's combine it and then calculate for y and x. Sige. Paano yun? Kailangan natin kunin yung difference, no? So, meron tayong equation 1, that's 2x plus 1y. And then equation 2, 2x plus 3y. Ang ginawa ko lang class, nilagay ko sa taas yung mas mataas para walang negative, no? So, yan pa rin naman yun, no? So, 2x plus 3y is equals to 600 minus 2x plus 1y is equals to 420. Oh, so, pagmaminosin lang natin tong dalawa, ha? Lagyan ko ito ng ganito para hindi nakakalito. So, 620 minus 420, that's 180. Siyempre, 2x minus 2x, that's 0. Plus, 3y minus 1y, that's 2y. So, therefore, y is equals to 90. So, lagay ko na dun yung 90. Yung sa y, no? So, meron na tayong value ng y. Substitute na natin yan dito sa equation na to. So, that's 2x plus 1y. Again, yung y natin is 90. So, 1 multiplied by 90. So, that's 90. So, therefore, 2x plus 90 is equals to 420. 2x is equals to 330. Transpose natin yung 90 papunta dito sa kabila. So, that's 420 minus 90. Dahil positive dito, pag transpose mo sa kabila, magiging negative. So, that's 330. So, now, x is equals to 165. 330 divided by 2. So, that's 165. Okay? So, meron na rin tayong value for x. So, that's 165. So, 165 times 4 plus 90 times 5. So, in total, that's 1,110. Actually, that answers requirements B and C. So how many units of each product X and Y should be produced to maximize the total contribution margin? So that's 165 units of X and 90 units of Y. Yun yung requirement B. Requirement C, calculate the contribution margin at the optimal solution. So total contribution margin is 1,110. Okay? So, yun. That's linear programming. Pero siguro ang gawin natin is recall natin ulit yung mga steps, no? Sige. Paulit-ulit na ako ha, pero pagtiyagaan natin to ha. In linear programming number 1, we have to formulate the objective function. So, our objective function in this case is to maximize contribution margin. Express natin yan. So, that's 4x plus 5y. Ayun, yung contribution margin. So, this is our objective function. No? Now, after that, we'll also need to formulate constraints naman. So, in this case, ano ba yung mga constraints natin? So, number 1, in the machining department, meron lang tayong available 420 hours. That's maximum na, no? So, let's express that in algebraic equation. So that's 2x, 2 hours per unit of x, and 1 hour per unit of y is equal to or less than 420. Dito class, wag kang magkakamaling ilagay greater than kasi maximum na to, no? So it cannot be greater than 420 dahil ito na yung maximum. So it can only be less than or equal to 420. So ganun din sa finishing, express lang din natin siya in equation. So then, next step is yung non-negativity constraints, no? So, ito naman palagi lang nilalagay dyan, no? Okay? So, next step natin is, yun, gawa ka lang ng table na ganito. This table naman is based on the objective function, you know? So, remember, our objective function is to maximize total contribution margin. So, we have two products, X and Y. Ito yung contribution margin per unit natin. Inaalam lang natin dito is how many units ba to produce to get the maximum contribution margin. Okay? And then using the constraints, nag-assume lang tayo una if x is 0 to get the y. And then next step is assume that the other product is 0 to get the value of the other product. Ngayon, since meron tayong dalawang equations, ang tandaan lang natin palagi is kunin yung lower value. Pag-usapan natin, bakit ba kailangan yung lower value? The reason why we use the lower value is to make sure that we still comply with the constraints. No? So in this case, tignan natin ha, kay Y. Kung ginamit ko si 420, dito pa rin, pasok pa rin naman siya. So wala tayong problema. Pero kung ginamit ko si 300 dito kay X, pasok pa rin siya dito, pero kung 0 naman to, pasok pa rin siya, no? Pero it won't be the same if we have 3 or more products. So therefore, let's use the lower value. No? So in this case, 200 and this one is 210. No? So siguro ang ilagay na lang natin as part of this step is get the value or yung lower value, no? So in this case, there are only two values being compared. Doon tayo sa lower. Okay? So the next step is combine the two functions or two equations. Paano natin kino-combine? Dine-deduct natin yung dalawa to get, and then from there, we can apply yung basic algebra and compute for the variable, no? So in this case, inuna natin yung y, and then we substitute it to get the other variable. Okay, so that's linear programming. Do you have any questions, class? Sige. Kung wala, like I said, there's another problem here. Actually, it's similar problem, no? Na iba lang, ay, same din ang constraints natin. Same din yung objective function, maximize contribution margin. And then given yung capacity in hours. And then yung per hour nung product natin. I-try nyo to as an assignment, no? So, para lang ma-practice yung buong process ng linear programming. Kasi 'di ba meron ka ng isang straight problem in the module. So kung naaral mo yan, okay ka na. And then I discuss another problem, straight problem. So let's apply yung natutunan mo dun sa assignment. No? So it's already published in Canvas. So let's try, no? Let's try to apply what you've learned. No? So let's now go to discussion problem number 3. The requirement is how would the restriction, so another term for constraints, no, for machine type B be expressed. So ito na class, no, this is one of the CPA board, previous CPA board exam question. Pansinin mo, ang tinatanong lang dito is ano daw yung equation to denote the constraints for machine type B. Paano yan? Remember, di ba, ang initial step natin is to create the objective function. Next step is to formulate equation for the constraints, no? So, nandito lang yung question. Sige. Sige. Say natin, ha? Objective function natin is provided yung contribution margin. So, that's 12C plus 7A. Tama ba yun? Objective function natin. Now, for type D machine, so ito yung type D, and then type B. Ang constraints natin is 6 hours of C. So 6C plus 9A. Tama ba yun? 6C plus 9A. Ilan lang? Kay type D is 120. Kunin ko na lang yung ano ko dito, ha? At para hindi ko na hanapin. Oops, ano ba yun? Ito. 120. Okay? Next is 4C plus 5A is less than or equal to 80. Okay? So the answer to the requirement of problem 3 is, kasi type B lang naman. So ito. Oh, nasundan niyo ba yun, class? Parehas ba tayo ng sagot?
Yes po, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, very good. So that's discussion problem 3. No? Pag-usapan pala natin yung lagay ko dito 3. 3. In linear programming kasi, there's also another way to solve it. No? So that's by way of graph. Balikan natin yung problem 1 natin. Pero kasi it's very unusual that you'll be preparing graph during the board exam, no? So, but then pag-usapan lang din natin 'to, no? So paano 'yun, class? Puntahan natin yung problem 1 natin, no? So in problem 1, meron tayong dalawang departments. Tapos ipa-plot lang natin dito yung result, no? So yung una, 'di ba ang una natin is 420 and 600. So yung lines na to, ito yung just to signify yung constraints natin. And then yung mga points where nag-meet yung line, ito ngayon yung mga na-solve natin using this one. Tingnan mo, pansinin natin ha. Siyempre, di ba, kung naalala nyo, yung part na to, ito yung sinishade natin pag gumagawa tayo ng graph. And then, ang kinoconsider lang natin dyan is yung mga corner points. No? Unang corner point natin is 0 and 0. Pero syempre, hindi natin i-consider yun dahil parehas naman ng 0. Next corner point is 200 and 0. So that's 0 and 200. Pansinin mo, class, ito lang naman yan. Next natin is 210 and 0. And actually, ito yan. And then finally, yung nag-meet yung 165 and 90. This one, class. So pinrove lang natin that there's an alternative to computing your linear programming. That's by way of a graphical form. Okay? Meron pa ba akong... Oh, sige. Let's do problem number 4. In problem number 4, the requirement is how would the objective function be expressed? Okay. So in this problem, in discussion problem number 4, the objective function is to minimize the cost. So therefore, our answer is 40x plus 20y. That's it. No? So that's our objective function. So kung napapansin nyo, that's the initial step. Ano? So remember, in linear programming, that's the initial step. So that's the objective function. So in this case, minimize product cost. Given naman yung product cost natin, that's 40 per gallon and 20 per gallon for material Y. So that's 40x plus 20y. Okay? Sige. Discussion problem 5. In a system of equations for a linear programming model, which of the following equations would not represent constraint? O sige, kayo muna, class, and then pag-usapan natin yung sagot later on. constraints ang pinag-uusapan dyan ha. So, tingnan mo na agad yung ano daw yung constraints na meron tayo. At tandaan na, ang requirement is not. So, ibig sabihin, tatlo dyan is part of the constraint. O sige, pag-usapan natin to. So, the Katangalan, dandahan sa pagbasa ha. The Katangalan Company plans to expand its sales force by opening several new branch offices. The Katangalan will consider opening only two types of branches, 20-person branches or type A and 10-person branches or type B. Expected initial cash outlays are 1.3 million for a type A branch and 670,000 for type B branch. So yun daw initial cash outlay ha. Expected annual cash inflow net of income taxes is 92,000 for type A and 38,000 for type B. Katangalan will hire no more than 200 employees for the new branch offices and will open no more than 20 branch offices. Linear programming will be used to help decide how many branch offices should be opened. Katangalan had 10.4 million in capital available for new branch offices. In a system of equations for a linear programming model, which of the following equations would not represent constraints? Ano daw dyan yung hindi not Sige. Siguro, ang gawin natin for this type of problem is yung process of elimination, no? Unahin natin yung letter A. A plus B is less than 20. Ano dyan yung possible na tinatanong, no? So, ito yan, no? Will open no more than 20 branches or 20 branch offices. So, office ng A and office ng B, sabi no more than 20. So, is less than 20. So, correct ba to o hindi? A plus B is less than 20. Tama siya, class, no? Kasi nasatisfy niya to. Yung constraints number 1, no? So, type A and type B branches but no more than 20 branches. So, either kung ilan ng type A at saka type B but not more than 20. So, A is correct. Punta natin si letter B. Si letter B, ang pinag-uusapan naman natin dito is employees. Sabi, will hire no more than 200 employees. Pero ilan ba yung employees? Ni A tsaka ni B. Ayun, 20 person for type A. So 20A plus 10 person for type B plus 10B. But not more than 200. So in short class, tama pa rin to. Puntahan natin si letter D. Ako, mukhang alam mo na yung sagot, no? Puntahan natin si letter D. Si letter D, 10.4. So yun yung available capital. Pero magkano ba yung initial cash outlay? No? So 1.3 for A plus 670 for B is equal to or less than 10.4 million. Tama pa rin, no? Pag-usapan natin si letter C. Si letter C, ang pinag-uusapan is ano tong 128,000? Hindi. Ito yung total nung annual cash inflow. Annual cash inflow is 92 plus 38. 92 plus 38. 130. Pero pansinin mo, meron kang 92A kay A, tsaka 38 for B. Pero dito 36. Kaya ito yung maling sagot, no? Sa letter C. Na-gets ba yan, class?
Opo.
Sige, good. So, ganyan yung magiging type ng problems, no, pag multiple choice, no? So, kaya ang importante for linear programming, aside from knowing to do your algebraic equation, yung solve for x or solve for y, or solve for the unknown or variable, is yung formulation pa lang ng equation, no? So, yun yung importante. Kasi, kung hindi ka marunong mag-formulate ng equations, definitely hindi mo naman maso-solve yung variable doon, no? Yung mga unknown. So, yun talaga yung key. Okay? So, yun yung pag-practicean natin. Now, let's do, I think this is the last problem, no, for this topic. So, considering the constraints in processing, which combination of products Y and Z maximizes the total contribution margin? I think meron akong solution for ayun, meron nga tayo. Sige, isa-isa na lang natin ito. Oops, ginawa ko. Sige, ito medyo tricky. The Kalakian company makes toys, A and B, each of which needs to be processed in cutting and wrapping. The contribution margin is 6 per product A. Ayun na, sinulat ko na. And 5 for product B. Then, meron tayo ngayon total contribution margin. O, wag na malilito sa TCM ha, total contribution margin. Now, meron daw tayong mga constraints, no? So, the table below shows the maximum number of units or constraints of each product that may be processed in 2 departments. So, meron tayong maximum capacities. So, for cutting, 60 and 80 for product A, and then 60 and 40 for product B. Ngayon, class, ang atake for this type of product is isa-isa na lang natin. So, tingnan mo ha. Sabi, 40 units of A and 20 units of B. Kasi ang pinapakompute sa atin is yung maximum, no? Maximum total contribution margin. So, 40 times 6 and then 20 times 5. Sunod, so that's A. Sunod, 60 units of A. Okay? 60 times 6. So, okay na tayo dyan. Next, 80 units of A. And then 0 units of B. Okay na rin tayo dyan. Next, 0 units of A. So, 0 to. Ay, ito, lagay ko lang dito yung A, B, C, D, and E. Tinetest na natin to eh. Ito na yung pinaka-approach na ginagawa natin. Ano? So, letter E na ako, 0 units of A, and then 60 units of B. 60 times 5. No? So, ito na ngayon yung total contribution natin. Ngayon, class, kung napapansin mo, ang pinakamataas is letter C. Pero, pag-usapan natin to ha. Tandaan na may constraint kay letter C. Ang sabi kay letter C, 80 units of A. Pero tandaan mo, class, na may limit lang na 60 units dito sa cutting department. So, meaning, hindi ka pwedeng umakyat ng 80 units. So, therefore, ang answer natin is letter B, 360. The reason being is letter C is letter C will violate yung constraint natin. No? So, letter B is the correct answer. Okay? So, that ends our discussion on linear programming.
This has been your instructor, Mark Gibson. Thank you for learning with us. See you in our next discussion. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya!